You want to be a professional athlete? Then there's some things you're going to have to give up, right? Now, some of it is the genetic lottery of how tall you are and how athletic you are. But some of it is about how hard you want to work, right? I will be completely blunt and honest with you. I stayed back in 8th grade. I was little, and my first year I was in 8th grade, because I knew I was staying back and because I was just a turd, I didn't behave all that well. It wasn't a terribly enjoyable experience for any of us. But I did it for sports. And you know what? It worked. Now, you might say to yourself, well, you're older. And I was older. I graduated high school at 19 years old. And I grew about 9 inches in the year in which I did 8th grade a second time. And the difference is pretty obvious, right? The difference is going into my junior season, I was recruited by mostly mid-majors and 1 or 2 high majors. And by my senior year, going into my senior year, I was recruited by everybody. Everybody. And from that college basketball career, I played professionally overseas, some here stateside, and made it to being a basketball analyst and a national radio host. All of that worked. But there is an amount of dedication and sacrifice in order to do so. Right? Because to stay back, you're not going to do it in your same school. That's weird. Wait, weren't you just here last year? Because you don't want to be seen as that kid that gets held back in 8th grade because he's a dope. And so you go to a different middle school. And then you go to a different high school because you don't want to go to high school with all the kids that you grew up going to, only you're a year behind them now. A little bit weird. So your life restarts twice over. When I went to high school, it was 10 minutes away from where I lived, as opposed to being 2 minutes away. Different town, different district. I didn't know anybody except for a couple of kids that I played summer basketball with. That's it. So there's an amount of sacrifice and dedication, things that you give up. Because everyone says, hey, I want to be great. But are you actually willing to do the things it takes to be great? I used to get up every morning and shoot at 7 a.m. at my high school gym. How many people were willing to do that? I had a trainer. I ate right. I had to get good grades, you know. I didn't party. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke, you know. I went to dances. I had a girlfriend. I had a fairly normal life. But all of the other stuff that kids tried or did or experimented with in high school, I didn't. I bring that up not because I'm some holier than thou, but because there is an amount of sacrifice. And I would tell you that the thing that kept me out of the NBA was my shooting. And that came down to 1, confidence, and 2, I would be honest that I had a college life. I had a girlfriend who became my wife. I had a good time. I still worked in the gym, but I kicked myself over how many times could I have kept going in there during the season. I gave up video games and all the other nonsense that I wasted my time with. Just got 30 minutes more a day of shooting. Would I have played and made the NBA? Might not change my life, but in terms of accomplishing the ultimate goal, would I have? Or would we have won a national championship? Maybe. James Harden was a no-show at the first and second days of the Rockets camp. His new head coach, Stephen Silas, said that today was a bit of a setback. Because yesterday it was, he's not here, it's COVID protocol, but we expect him to be there. We expect him to be here. And today was COVID protocol. And this all coming on the heels of the reports that James Harden wanted to be traded, most notably to Brooklyn. I'm going to tell you something that I think you already know. James Harden is not an NBA champion. You already know that. He does not really want to be an NBA champion. He's like the kid who says, I want to be an NBA champion. Okay. Are you willing to do everything it takes? Now, look, that doesn't mean that ultimately you do everything and you're still going to win. But have you done everything it takes? And I would be honest and tell you, hey, dude, look, even if he shows up at camp, even if he's a good soldier, they ain't beating the Lakers. They ain't beating the Clippers. And he has every right to be upset at where this franchise is because a couple years ago, they were one of the 27 threes consecutively missed away from beating the Warriors at peak Warrior strength. I know they didn't have Andre Iguodala, and getting to the NBA Finals and maybe winning the damn thing. And after that, they lost some of their personnel. Ultimately, they lost their coach and their GM. They traded players away. They went from Chris Paul to Russell Westbrook. It got prohibitively worse. Right? So I don't blame him for being maybe upset, miffed, and like, I don't know where we're going. But dude, this is no different than Lou Williams going to the strip club and getting some wings. You're telling everybody that you don't really want to win. Even if you want to win elsewhere, and it's not in Houston, you get your ass to practice and show up and you play the good soldier. Why? Because then Houston, if they were forced to make a deal, is more likely to make a deal because you're not giving pennies on the dollar for James Harden, getting true market value because it doesn't feel like you're a malcontent. The idea of pouting and not showing up, that may have worked for Kobe in the past, okay? But you also have to remember that Kobe Bryant, as much as there was a time which he wanted to be traded and then they refused ultimately to trade him because the Bulls wouldn't throw Luol Deng in the trade. This is a true story. And by the way, the Lakers are still playing Luol Deng. The fact is that Kobe was a guy who, he did have his flaws. He was a selfish player offensively. You know, he was tough to coach. He was tough on teammates. But Kobe was a guy where there was never a moment where you thought he wasn't prepared. There was never a moment where you thought he hadn't worked on his game. He hadn't worked on his body. That wasn't him. And Harden puts up these stats. Like, look, if you've had these disappointing seasons and it's your franchise and you got a new head coach, you better be there, the first person to greet him. By the way, they probably traded for John Wall to make you happy. And even if you're not happy and you don't think it'll work, you know what you should do? You should be there. Instead, he was in Atlanta at a party with no mask on, and now he's in COVID protocol, and we don't know if he wants to be there, doesn't want to be there. What we do know is he don't want to win. Everybody says they want to win until you say, okay, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to do it? Right? He wants to win on his terms. That's not the way it works. That is not the way it works. You want to win, and your jersey is retired to strip club. These two things cannot coexist. It doesn't mean you can't have a great life and a great financial future and have had a great career and be an MVP. But if you really, really, really want to win, if you ever to that, what happens with most of these guys is they finally get to that point where they get it. Like, man, I'm going to be the best teammate. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And their body lets them down. They just don't have it anymore. That's usually what happens. I mean, I think Dwight Howard on many levels kind of figured it out a little bit, sort of. But, I mean, he's an NBA champion. He was on a team that won, but he was as replaceable as somebody's socks were. Really. There's a reason James Harden hadn't won anything. And him no-showing for the first 2 days of a camp with a new general manager and a new head coach and a new co-star is all the reason you need to know.